Okay, let's dive straight into this. Welcome to today's explainer. Today, we are completely unpacking the elemental building blocks of the English language. Sometimes to really wrap our heads around complex communication, we have to zoom way in on the underlying architecture. So we're starting with a remarkably fundamental piece of source text to look at the exact, absolutely essential parameters required to get a phonetic system off the ground. We are looking strictly at Chapter 2 of our source material, the phonetic foundations of the English alphabet. And what's wild is how incredibly precise the scope of this chapter is. It literally distills the vast, messy complexities of language down to just three extremely concise pillars. We're talking about the alphabet itself, the visual casing of those letters, and finally, how those letters are actually vocalized. By isolating just these three things, the text really forces us to recognize the absolute bare minimum requirements of our phonetic coding system. So here is our roadmap for the breakdown. Number 1, the alphabet, A to Z. Number 2, capital and small letters. And number 3, a focus on pronunciation. We are basically going on a journey from the macro collection of letters right down to their physical, auditory execution. Let's get into it. All right, starting with Section 1, the alphabet A to Z, which serves as our macro collection. The source material highlights this closed set of 26 characters as our ultimate starting point. And honestly, it is absolutely fascinating to think about. This finite inventory, which actually derives from ancient Phoenician scripts, is the complete framework from which every single word, every sentence, and every complex thought in the English language is constructed. Before we can even begin to talk about sounds or shapes, we have to acknowledge this specific macro collection. It's the raw data of our entire communication system. But that leads us to our really crucial question to think about as we analyze this framework. How exactly do these 26 characters actually form our foundations? Because having a simple inventory from A to Z is one thing, but as the source text implies by dedicating a whole chapter to this, a list just isn't enough. A true foundation requires structure, it requires rules, and it requires application. So to answer how they function as a bedrock, we really need to look at the next two pillars the source gives us. That brings us to Section 2, capital and small letters, or the visual mechanics. Now, what's really interesting about the text here is the very deliberate distinction it makes between capital and small letters. This visual casing is the crucial second piece of the puzzle. The text doesn't just hand us the alphabet as some abstract, floaty concept. It firmly grounds it in visual mechanics. The difference between a capital and a small letter actually provides vital structural information to us as readers. It tells us exactly where a sentence begins, it flags proper nouns for us, and it creates a necessary visual rhythm. This dual case system is honestly an indispensable tool that organizes our raw data into a readable, decipherable code. Moving right along to Section 3, focus on pronunciation, which is all about the physical execution. Let's move to the next part and see how this builds into a complete functioning system. First, we have the raw materials, the letters A to Z. Second, we apply the visual mechanics, those capital and small cases. And third, the absolute capstone of Chapter 2, the pronunciation. This is such a brilliant thematic progression in the text. We've moved from static, visual symbols sitting quietly on a page to dynamic, auditory, spoken sounds. Pronunciation is the physical execution that brings the entire visual code to life. Without this third step, the letters are just silent symbols. So the crucial point we need to take away is that these phonetic foundations rely absolutely on these three pillars, working together in perfect harmony. The source material explicitly groups the English alphabet, the capital and small letters, and the pronunciation. It's a unified trinity. The alphabet gives us the inventory, the casing gives us the visual structure, and the pronunciation gives us the auditory reality. By isolating these three exact elements, the text hands us a perfect blueprint of how written and spoken English are inextricably bound together. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought to ponder. Without the visual casing to organize the text, and without the auditory pronunciation giving it physical life, would the A to Z alphabet have any real phonetic foundation at all? It is a fascinating question, and it perfectly underscores exactly why the source material pairs these specific elements together. The visual symbols and the spoken sounds are literally two sides of the exact same coin. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this breakdown has given you a fresh perspective on the structural bedrock of our language.